I came home with lilies in one hand, their stems wrapped in wet paper, and the faint mark of a hospital bracelet still soft on my skin. Just 10 days. Not long. Enough time to miss my garden, to imagine the orchids needing water. My son Simon had said he'd take care of them. His wife had said, "Rest well, we've got everything covered." So I smiled when the taxi turned the corner. But then, the key didn't turn. A sheet of paper on the gate, flat, deliberate. "Sorry, Mum, we've moved on. You don't live here now." I stared at it. Now I don't live here. He sent me this? Not a call. Not even a knock on the door. Is this what "we've got everything covered" meant? Had I misunderstood? Was this a joke? A mistake? My hand hovered over the gate but didn't push. Beside it sat a plastic box. Inside, I can saw my rust-coloured robe from our last anniversary, still damp. The old sewing kit I once used to patch Simon's only Christmas gift. And my photo album, warped with moisture, one picture torn where my face used to be. My name is Margaret Sinclair. I'm 64. The worst part isn't being turned away. It's realising they never meant for me to return. It didn't feel like betrayal at first. It felt like help. Let me handle the bills. Let me check the mail. They made it sound like kindness. I used to think forgetting small things was just part of aging, but now I wonder if it was part of being erased. It started months ago when Rachel said the utility companies were switching to a new digital billing system. She offered to streamline things, said I didn't need to be bogged down with it anymore. She smiled as she took the folder from my hands. Gas, electric, internet. "Don't worry, Margaret, I've got it all under control." I didn't ask questions. Why would I? It sounded helpful, normal. Later, I noticed the electric bill stopped arriving. When I asked, Simon waved it off. "Rachel gets it online. We split it." But I didn't split it. I owned the house. I paid every bill. I always had. And then came the property tax notice. Not addressed to me, but to Simon. It mentioned a possible reassessment of ownership. I remember standing in the kitchen blinking at the envelope. Simon told me it was a clerical error. "Probably because we both live here," he said. "But you don't own it," I almost said. But I didn't. One evening I saw Rachel with my deed, the original copy notarized and sealed pulled from my desk drawer. She said she was just checking something for refinancing options. I'd asked her to put it back. She never did. Later she insisted I'd misplaced it. That same week my debit card was declined at the pharmacy. Simon reassured me. Probably a fraud lock. Cards get touchy when they're inactive. But mine wasn't inactive. I'd used it the day before. The bank later said a request had been filed to freeze activity due to cognitive concerns. Filed by a co-resident with access to financial responsibilities. Rachel. The phrase stuck in my mind, cognitive concerns. Was that what they were building? A case that I wasn't mentally fit, trying to justify taking over my affairs? I began searching for more. A change of address notice. A forwarding request for my mail had been processed 3 weeks prior. Not by me. I was still listed as the legal owner on county records, but the utilities were no longer in my name. My mail wasn't reaching me. My finances were monitored. I hadn't signed over anything, yet my presence on paper was already disappearing. And now I saw it. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was strategy. Every favor, every signature I didn't give was being used to build a quiet legal wall around me. To paint me as someone no longer able to manage what I'd built, to gently remove me from my own life, with a smile, and an email, and a forwarded bill. You don't need a courtroom to be dispossessed. Just a moment of trust, a favor you didn't question, and someone close enough to know exactly where to cut you, so it doesn't bleed right away. Some people throw things away when they're broken, others throw them away when they forget who gave them meaning. I was starting to realize I was both. I opened the box they left for me, the one that held everything they thought was enough to send me off quietly. Everything inside was intact, but arranged the way one might pack up a guest room, with efficiency, not care. Just enough to be done with it. My rust-coloured silk robe, the one I wore on our 30th wedding anniversary, was folded hastily, the hem still damp from rain. Beside it sat a dented tin sewing kit. I recognised it immediately. It had lived in my drawer for over 20 years. A few spools of thread rolled loosely inside, a scrap of yellow cloth curled at the edge. But what stopped me was the tiny silver needle I'd once used to mend Simon's blue sweater back in 2nd grade. That year, Christmas came early, but the money didn't. The sweater was his only gift. I remember that freezing night. Simon had a fever but still insisted on wearing it for the first day back at school. I stayed up patching the frayed sleeve, my fingers cracked from cold, my eyes blurred with fatigue, but my heart full, knowing he'd walk out the door wrapped in something I made with love. The next morning he looked up and grinned. "Mum, you sew better than the fairy godmother." That sentence lived in me for 30 years. Now, that same sewing kit was tossed between a mop head and a bag of worn-out cleaning rags. No one had thought to keep it. No one had thought at all. I turned to the cardboard box. Beneath the hand-stitched quilt lay an old photo album, its spine cracked, pages warped with moisture. I flipped through gently, Simon on his first birthday, the 3 of us at the beach. Me in a sun hat, laughing. One photo was torn at the corner. My face had been cut out. Precisely, not accidentally. At the bottom of the box was a crayon-coloured card. "I love you more than anything, Mummy." I used to keep it in my wallet, pull it out when days felt heavy. Now it was pressed under an empty marmalade jar, filed away with all the other things someone had decided no longer mattered. I sat still, one hand resting on the tin box, the other gripping a wet corner of the photo album. And I thought, not because these things were worthless, but because they only meant something to me. And for them, that wasn't enough. They didn't throw away memories. They threw away mine, and they thought I wouldn't notice. They took my house, my money, and almost my name, all without ever raising their voices. Now I was going back to the only place they hadn't touched. The small 2nd-floor walk-up above the old bakery in Ashcroft. My quiet retreat after Arthur passed. Where I'd kept books, records, and silence. Where grief and math coexisted year after year until I stopped needing to count other people's losses to feel whole. It smelled of lemon oil and carbon paper. The curtains were drawn. The desk was as I left it, sturdy, wide, with drawers that creaked, a filing cabinet in the corner, locked, and, behind a panel in the floor, the old safe Arthur insisted we keep. "Paper is more loyal than people," he used to say. I wiped a layer of dust from the desk, then opened the cabinet with the spare key, I'd hidden behind the baseboard a decade ago. Inside the cabinet, I found exactly what I had hoped still existed. A manila folder, labelled in my own handwriting. Title, Primary Residence. Inside was a notarized copy of the original deed, bearing my name. No co-owners, no disclaimers. Next to it, a certified copy of our marriage certificate from 1981. And tucked neatly behind both was the prenuptial addendum Arthur and I had drafted years ago. It clearly stated that the house had been purchased with my inheritance, and that it would remain my sole and protected property, excluded from any joint claims, now or ever. Further down, a bundle of printed bank statements, organised, annotated. Every mortgage payment, every tax record, every repair expense is paid from my personal account. It was all there. A paper trail that said, clearly and irrevocably, this was mine. There was no power of attorney, no mental health evaluation, no court order of guardianship, no consent to transfer. In the eyes of the law, I hadn't lost anything. Not officially, but the law doesn't monitor what's stolen in increments. And that's how they'd done it. In increments. I sat back in the old leather chair, documents spread before me like puzzle pieces I'd once hidden from myself, And for the first time in weeks, my hands didn't tremble, because now I held not just proof, but position. They'd counted on my silence. But paper remembers what people forget, and I had just turned the key on everything they tried to bury. The next morning, I met Evelyn at the cafe we used to escape to after long days in the office. Same chipped mugs, same scent of old wood and bitter coffee. She sat down, eyes already scanning the folder I placed in front of her. "Okay," she said, flipping it open. "What am I looking at?" "My life," I said. "Or what's left of it." She gave me a look but didn't interrupt. "I found the deed, still in my name," I continued. "Notarized, dated. Original and the prenup," she asked. "In the back. Arthur made sure it covered the house, said inheritance stays out of reach." Evelyn smirked. "Smart man." Then she leaned in. "Margaret, tell me the truth. How bad is it?" "They've rerouted my mail. Utilities got moved under Rachel's name. One of my cards was frozen. Simon said it was a bank error, but you know that tone people use when they're lying kindly?" Evelyn exhaled sharply. "They're building a pattern." "I thought I was being forgetful," I admitted. "Turns out I was being removed." She nodded slowly. "Not in court, not yet. But give them another 6 months, and they'll have enough evidence to argue you've lost capacity." "Legally? Not if we act now." I looked at her, almost afraid to hope. "Okay. What do I need to do?" "First, file a notice with the county clerk. You're the legal owner, but we make it visible. Any attempted sale or lien triggers a red flag." I nodded. "Then," she said, pulling a pen from her purse, "you send a cease and desist to both of them. Formally warn them. No legal actions, no representations, no acting on your behalf. Not without your written, notarized consent. And the mail? Revoke the forwarding. Get a P.O. box. Change your billing address with the bank, insurance, every utility." I rubbed my temples. "Feels cold." "It's not cold, Margaret. It's necessary. You're not punishing them. You're reminding them this life still belongs to you." I didn't answer. I just reached for the pen. Simon cleared his throat. "I just think maybe we all acted a little fast." I folded my arms. "You forged my signature." Rachel smiled tightly. "We didn't forge anything. It was just misunderstood." I looked her dead in the eye. "Your handwriting doesn't misunderstand legal documents." Simon stepped in quickly. "Mum, come on. Let's not make this uglier than it has to be." "I'm not the one who made it ugly." My voice was steady. "I just stopped pretending it was beautiful." Rachel gave a short laugh, thin, sharp. "You always did have a flair for drama." "And you always did have a flair for entitlement," I replied. Simon raised his hands like a referee. "All right, this isn't helpful. Let's just start over. Talk this through." "Talk," I said, narrowing my eyes. "You mean after months of removing me behind my back? After the locked accounts, the rerouted mail?" He shifted uncomfortably. "We thought it'd be easier that way." "For who?" Silence. Rachel broke it, her voice quieter. "We thought you were struggling, getting older. We didn't want to scare you. You didn't want to ask me." Simon tried again. "We didn't mean to hurt you. But you didn't mind benefiting from it." No one replied. The pause said more than any apology could have. Simon looked down, rubbing his palms together. "I think maybe we underestimated how much this house meant to you." I tilted my head. "Number you underestimated how much I meant to this house." Rachel shifted and crossed her arms. "Well, the truth is, this place is too much for one person. You said it yourself last winter. Heating bills, the roof. And instead of offering help, you offered eviction." Rachel narrowed her eyes. "We didn't evict you. You left. I left for a weekend. You packed my life into bins." Simon's jaw tightened. "It wasn't like that." I pointed toward the hallway. "My wedding quilt was in a garbage bag, Simon." He didn't look up. "I told you I'd come back Monday, but you made sure I wouldn't recognize the place." Rachel scoffed. "You're twisting everything." I raised an eyebrow. "Am I?" Or is it just harder to rewrite the story when the author's still alive? That landed. Simon opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was charged, like air before a storm. And for the first time since they walked in, Rachel's voice lost its polish. So what now? You expect us to beg? I didn't answer her question, because begging was never the point. But it was the first time they realized they might not be the ones writing the ending. They came to reclaim control. What they found was a woman who had already taken it back, on paper, in silence, and without permission. Rachel stepped forward, her voice slicing through the room. This is pathetic. You think this little stunt makes you powerful? You look desperate. I didn't even blink. Desperate is forging documents and calling it care. She scoffed, louder now. We built everything around this house. You were just the leftover we didn't know where to store. Simon flinched at her words. But Rachel... She was unraveling now, the truth rushing out like venom. You were slowing everything down, the kitchen, the loan, the future. You sat in the middle of our life like some relic, watching, hovering. Simon tried to stop her, his voice strained. Rachel, stop! But she didn't. You were dead weight, and we were tired of waiting for you to disappear. I took a breath, let her choke on her own words. Then I answered, No, Rachel. You didn't want me to disappear. You wanted me erased. She folded her arms, defiant. So what? What now? I looked her dead in the eye. I read the fine print. I signed every bill, I saved every record. You faked one signature, mine. I delivered 10 into the county registrar's hands. Simon went pale. Rachel went silent. I walked to the door, opened it slowly. Let the cold air in. You're right. My time came and went. But in that time, I paid for every brick, every pipe, every memory in this house. Rachel stood frozen, still trying to process the fact that her threats held no weight here. Simon finally found his voice. This doesn't change what we built. This house. We've invested time, energy. I cut him off. Number U rearranged furniture and called it vision. You signed for groceries and called it a sacrifice. You played house in something you never owned and thought your ambition made it yours. Rachel clenched her fists. We did what we had to do. You were slipping. I stepped forward, slow and measured. Number, I was grieving. I was tired. And while I softened, you schemed. I let that sink in. Then I raised my voice, not to shout, but to make sure they heard every word. You rerouted my mail, took my name off the utility bills, forged my signature, applied for credit in my name, filed a pre-sale evaluation for a house you didn't own. I turned to Simon. And you stood there, watching, letting her do the dirty work so you could keep your hands clean. His mouth opened, closed. Nothing came out. Rachel tried one last angle. You think anyone's going to side with you? A bitter old woman who couldn't let go? I smiled. That bitter old woman just froze your access to the deed, flagged your credit, reported you both for wire fraud, and filed a legal warning with the real estate board. I walked toward the door. And, in case you're wondering, yes, the foundation I'm building already has its first donor. Me, fully funded from the sale of this house. They stared. And yes, I'll put my name on it, right above the words, for every woman who was asked to be quiet while someone else signed away her life. Then I opened the door and let them stand there, small, powerless, and finally, uninvited. They thought I'd crumble in shame. Instead, I stood tall in their silence and made it loud enough to be heard in every room they tried to erase me from. They didn't follow me when I stepped outside. The air was cool and crisp, the kind that wakes you up without asking permission. I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. I walked down the front path, slow, steady, past the garden I planted, past the porch where Simon used to sit with sticky fingers and bedtime stories, past everything they thought they could erase. Behind me, the silence stretched. I didn't look back, because some battles aren't won with rage. They're won when you leave the room. And they finally understand you're never coming back to clean up their mess. The new apartment was small, but the morning sun made it feel bigger than it was. No garden, no grand porch. But light poured in through the east window, catching the corner of her modest bookshelf, and the steam rising from her tea. On the wall, a new photo frame. Not a family portrait, not a wedding memory. Just her, Margaret, caught mid-laughter in a village far from here, surrounded by other women, sleeves rolled planting trees, joy unposed, nothing borrowed. That spring, while sorting old keepsakes, she found a crumpled drawing, Simon's from years ago, a stick figure version of her with giant red glasses and a crown. At the bottom, once written in shaky crayon, "I love you, Mom." She didn't cry. She cut off the words, kept the drawing, taped it to the inside of her closet door. A reminder. Some love doesn't survive, but you can still honor the version of yourself that once received it. Later that night, she opened her journal and beneath the final entry wrote one more quiet sentence. Some things don't need to come back, they just need to stop defining you. So, that's how the story ends. If this made you think, or if you've lived through something similar, share your thoughts in the comments. Our channel is a space for sharing tales of the elderly and family revenge stories from people who have weathered life's storms. Subscribe to the channel for more, because sometimes the deepest form of revenge is simply living on your own terms.